Welcome to Warrior in a Garden. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the podcast. I've been really waiting a long while to have this discussion with you, and we'll get into it more as we go. But welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's great to see you again, to be honest.
Yeah, awesome, man. Okay, so just quickly to run through sort of your backstory. Um, Let me just get this up here so we can so people can sort of see this thing. So you started in the Marines. When was that? Hold on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I joined the Marine Corps back in 2006, and then got out of the Marine Corps in 2011.
Okay. If I remember correctly, you got out as a sergeant. Is that right?
Yeah, I got out as a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and while I was in, I had two different jobs. I was my first part of my enlistment, I was in a thing called security forces, which was mostly stateside activity, guarding special assets on bases, basically nuclear assets for the U.S. government.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went into the infantry unit 2-7 for another 2 years before I got out.
Okay.
And yeah, I got out as the rank of sergeant. I was in my main primary job as a machine gunner.
Me too. In my my first years in, that's what I did. I carried what you guys call the M240 Bravo,
Mm-hmm.
the FN mag, we would call it. So from one machine gunner to another, man. Yeah, and then after that, how long was it until you got into contracting?
Honestly, not too long. The transition out of the military was less than beautiful, let's say. It was a really hard time in my life. I really had no direction and was drinking a lot, and my relationships were all failing. I couldn't hold a job, and so I was going through a divorce, and then in 2012 I started looking for contracts, because, to be honest, man, I felt really weird being back in the States and out of that, and really paranoid. And at least I knew that overseas, like, that paranoia was useful. Like, at least I could always have my head out, like, looking over my shoulder was not a hard. I didn't feel weird doing that in Iraq or Afghanistan. I could do that. But in the States, I would know that there's no reason to feel this way, but I did. So I pretty much went on my first contract in 2013 and was out in Afghanistan for a year for that contract.
Okay, well, let's maybe just talk about that quickly. I think it's important going in is that I know exactly what you're speaking of, and there's so many of us who do. It's this idea that you're in the thick of things, and you develop this hypervigilance and this constant threat assessment, etc. And then you make the transition back to civilian life, and all of a sudden, that is seen as something weird and not good, and symptom of disease, basically. Did you find that? You find a bit of an ostracization or criticism of your behavior?
I did, but I honestly, I didn't. I think at first I got a little bit. I pushed back against it, but I think it was much later when I realized that that my behavior was for a culture that I was no longer in anymore, and that culture was revolved around violence and war.
Yeah.
And so the people that were offended or corrected me, or were actually trying to help me, be a friend and be like, "Hey, Jared, we don't say those things," or "That really offended this person." And for my friends to have the courage to even tell me that, because I wasn't a very approachable person, I commend them for it. But I also realized that they didn't understand. And that was okay. Yeah. But then later, I also realized that maybe I didn't understand, because when I started into that military culture was a very young age, and that was my tribe. That was how things were. And where the hard part I think came for me was, which led to, thoughts of suicide and other things, was not wanting to let go
Mm,
of that version of myself and
mm,
let that version transition into a different version, because I thought that letting go of that had to mean like not talking about it, or not remembering it, or not like honoring that time frame. But that's not what I mean. What I mean is like letting go of that mentality or that person that was needed for that time frame,
yes.
and let that version evolve into a new version, so I can bridge that gap, so I can actually be in the civilian world and
Mm,
function with civilians, but also still be that warrior and
yeah.
speak for that warrior culture in a language that they can understand, because I can
Well,
be both.
well. This is exactly why I've called this podcast that. Is that we end up being a warrior in a garden. But getting to a point where you're comfortable being in the garden and not in the war is difficult.
Yes.
So the transition from the military was difficult. You didn't de-stress, you didn't decompress. You were hyper vigilant. You were doing all the classic stuff, suppressing all of those memories and experiences and what have you. And my question about that is, from my experience as well, is the people that understand you are your brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And is that I get the feeling that's what you talk about. That's what you're looking for, is to get back into the brotherhood.
Yeah, I was really, I mean, I think I think most humans, we just want to be loved and accepted by our group.
Of
Like
course.
we're herd animals. I mean, like we work, we wouldn't survive this long as a species without being in groups. Like
Yeah.
that's one of our superpowers. So so I think, yes, absolutely, that was what I was seeking. Was And I left the military, and my place, my job, my friends, my everything had just abruptly stopped. And I don't know what it's like in other countries, but in the United States, when you're out of the military, it's pretty much like they kick you in the ass out the door and they say thanks for your service, and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Like there's no transition, there's no nothing. Like I had a friend of mine that when he got out, he got out that afternoon, and then instead of starting his 12 and a half hour drive home, he decided that he was going to sleep in the barracks parking lot of the barracks that he stayed at for 4 years of his life,
Yeah.
and just was like, I'm not going to go into the barracks. I'm just going to sleep in my car for the night, hang out with some friends, and then I'm going to leave in the morning when I got time, so I'm not tired. The military police knocked on his window at like 10 p.m. and told him he had to go because he wasn't a Marine anymore,
Oh.
because he was out,
Yeah.
that he wasn't allowed to be on base. And
Oh.
he had, I mean, like he had lived like, right above where he was
Exactly.
sleeping for 4 years, and
Yeah.
they're just like, sorry, get out of here. And
Oh.
so he slept in a parking lot outside base and went and left in the morning. But that's just a small example of how drastic that cutoff is. Like
Mm.
it's not and I don't think it's that way for retirees. It might not be that way for people who stay in long enough to retire, because they have like a ceremony and a process and all this stuff.
Yes.
But for the rest of us that just don't re-enlist, it's like, thanks for your service, get out of here.
Yeah. No. Well, I don't think that's a unique experience. The South African experience was very much the same. One day to the next, uniform to civilian clothing. I think what I was looking for though is that from having spoken to you before, and from some of the things you've said, is that what you're looking for was not, and this is to be clear for people who are maybe who are not veterans, you weren't looking for violence, you were looking for the brotherhood.
Yes.
And I think that that's an important distinction. Does that resonate with you?
No, it absolutely does. And I think it's an easy misnomer for people who are outside perspectives of the military, because all they see is movies, or God forbid they maybe have seen military in action in life.
Yeah.
Um, it paints a pretty, it makes us not into people.
Yes,
right? It turns
for
us,
sure.
it turns us into a weapon, which
Yes.
is, yes, what we were trained to be was a weapon for our government to use. Um, but you are absolutely right. What we got from the catalyst of that violence, of like training us for violence, gave us as people a place where we felt like we had a purpose,
Yeah.
that we had a place, that we had we were helping and protecting people,
Yeah.
that we were accepted and not accepted at the same time. Like we had a brotherhood where it was like siblings, where they knew, they lived with you for so long, they knew all the stuff to trigger you, and they
Yeah.
knew all the stuff that you sucked at, and they knew all the stuff that you were good at, and they
Exactly.
would, and like brothers, they would poke at that because it was a, because it could mean their lives
Yeah.
if they didn't really highlight our weaknesses for us to try to make them into strengths. But unfortunately, that also is not a good tactic for living
Mm.
outside of the
Mm.
military, outside of warfare. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very proud of my time as a Marine, and I'm
Yeah.
very proud of the things that I did in the Marine Corps. But I also understand that the way the Marine Corps taught me how to think
Mm.
is not really a great, it's great for warfare. It'll
Yeah.
keep me alive, but
Yeah.
it might not be so good for raising kids and having a family.
Uh, yeah, so that's interesting, and I thought we'd actually get to this later, but now that you bring it up, um, let's just stick a pin in that. The idea about transitioning from military to civilian, how you apply the things that you've learned there in a way that is appropriate, that is appropriate behavior in civilian life, is for me a hugely important topic, and it's about things like that hypervigilance that is heavily criticized in civilian life, praised in the military, can be transitioned into being, I'm the one who wakes up when somebody tries to break into my house to protect my wife and kids. So that process of taking those military experiences, military culture, and transitioning it into something that is actually valuable in civilian life, I think is important.
I think it is too. And but the transition from unhealthy hypervigilance to healthy
Mhm.
vigilance
Yeah,
is different, and this can be very nuanced in the mind when you're thinking about it, because I resonate with what you're saying, like using it as your tool to be like, I'll be the one that's willing to stand up and protect my family.
exactly.
But words like protector are a bit can be a trap for me, because to protect means that I'm being directly attacked, or something
Yeah,
is directly coming at me. So if my purpose is to protect my family, I then assume my armor and my weapon again, and I'm
yeah,
back into that mindset. What I'm
yes.
trying to do now with my own transition is allow myself to say, like, the armor is hung up and the rifle is right there.
Mm,
And
mm,
anytime that I need it, I can grab it.
yeah, yeah.
And if
But
I
you're
get
not
the
wearing it
hint,
all the time.
but I don't want to wear my armor and carry my rifle while I'm doing dishes, man. You
Exactly.
know, or when I'm watching a movie with my kids, or I'm going
Exactly.
on a walk on the beach. You know, like
Yeah,
I wanna be able to take that off and know it's in the
yeah,
truck, in a sense. Like,
yes,
I got it if
yeah.
I need it.
No, 100%, 100%. But I think the point you make is valid. Is that that's part of the transition, is actually being able to take that armor off, and but know that it's within reach if you need it.
Always.
But it's but not to actually subsume your whole experience in alcohol and in a
Yes,
risky behavior and all of those things, because that's to me way more unhealthy.
totally.
Um, and
And
that's what you're talking about too.
yeah, and I don't think that you can healthily. I don't think you can actually probably get to that place where you can go from unhealthy hypervigilance to healthy vigilance. I don't know if you can get there while dealing with substance abuse and
Correct.
dealing and not actually um, processing your time from the military and trying to intertwine those stories to now. Like, you
Yeah.
have to, that inner work needs to be done. And if you are not, if it's very painful, it's going to be a long process. And
Yeah.
that's okay,
Sure.
because I mean, like, we're human, right? We don't, things that hurt, we don't want to do it. Like, it's just,
Yes.
that's just human.
Okay, so let's just continue. So you got a contract in Afghan.
Yeah, that was
Um,
my first contract in Afghan. I was doing static security, guarding a limited area because I had a security clearance, so I could
okay,
guard like an area. So a very um, non-kinetic
yeah,
experience. I mean, like, but we got pop shots at us every once in a while, and some rockets shot at the towers that never hit
yeah,
anything. You know, the average harassment that we'd get on
yeah.
base.
Yeah, well, yeah, the thing that in civilian life would have been a disaster, in that context, and you'll understand what I'm saying, is fantastic because it keeps the OSHA people off your back.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So that contract you spend a year or two.
Yeah, I spent a year and a couple months, I believe, in Afghanistan for that time, and that was an 11-month long contract before I could take a leave break. So it was
Wow.
11 months in country, and then 30 days back home, and then I came back for a couple months and then quit because it was too long of a transition. I just couldn't be in country that long anymore.
Okay. Can we just pause a second? I just
Yep.
have to do something. Okay. So you left that the Afghan contract and then what?
So I left the Afghan contract with a bunch of money in my pocket and still not knowing what to do with my life. So I went back home and I rented an apartment, and I proceeded to basically just get really drunk, play video games, and just like try to decompress, I guess, is what I was trying to do, because I never felt like I ever had time to just like do nothing or do
Yeah.
whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And this was the first time I ever had like a good amount of money in my account, and I was single at that time. I didn't have any kids. So like it was just and I was also still like, I think I was 26 at that time.
Yeah.
So but that didn't that eventually ran out of steam, so I started bouncing at clubs and bars, and then I was a bouncer at strip clubs, multiple
Mm.
different clubs for about 6-7 months, and I started getting into that scene with women and cars and
Yeah.
guns and drugs and all the
All this.
stuff,
Yeah.
and money started running low, and I was sick of living paycheck to paycheck, and I really like bragging about being a contractor, so I went back on a contract after that. I went and found another one, and through the contractor, um, I guess, what would we call it, the
Mm.
network that we
Well,
have, our friends, I
yeah.
just, hey, is there a contract up? Is there a contract up? And
Hmm.
eventually found one in Iraq, which is the one that I met you on, and then I was on that contract for almost 3 years.
Yeah. I actually I remember when I met you, very specifically, and I don't know why this sticks in my head. Zero 4 had sent us to go and have a look at why the quad 23 mils were firing. I don't know if you remember, and you guys arrived. I was Quebec 2, and you guys arrived and got off. And initially, the first thing I spotted about you was the Molyneux. You had a Molyneux patch on your webbing,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, "Hey, that's a bit different. How are you and what have you?" And that's how we got chatting. You'll see, I've got one now. I've got
Oh,
the
very cool. Yeah.
yeah. That's to put on the scar for the protection thing from when the guys broke into my place and tried to kill me and stab me with knives and stuff. So I remember meeting you there, and wait, I'm going to try and share this quickly because I think this is the most iconic thing that I can imagine.
And
Um,
I think I know what picture you're going to show, and I just want
yeah,
everyone to know this was not where I was at when this picture was taken.
no,
Like, when you met me, I was not
exactly.
the yoga posing guy you're seeing in this picture.
But you can see the Molyneux there on the
Yeah.
on the webbing. Okay, yeah. So you were in the contract, and I mean, and we both know what the contract was like. It was um, 8-hour shifts, rotating, 3 months on, 1 month off, busy, training all the time. a lot of that, and a lot of boredom and what have you. And from what you told me, at some stage during that 3 year period, you then you took off and you went off to the jungle. So
I
tell us a
did.
little bit about that, about what led to that decision.
Well, for you all, you had 90/30s. We had
True.
like 6 to 8 months of work, and then we'd have 30 days.
Mm,
And so when I would go home, man, I would do what everyone probably did. I would party my ass off. Like I would drink, I would party. I mean, like, and I would just meet up with my friends from the strip club scene, right? So they're
yeah,
all in that world. But my friends, my childhood friends that I grew up with, they were all into punk rock and stuff when we were growing up, and still into it at that point when we were in our 20s. But they were also into psychedelics. Same with my girlfriend at the time.
yeah,
And every time I would go home, they would be like, "Hey, we're gonna end the time with like the new psychedelic." And I want everyone to know out there, I was taking them recreationally, like for
yeah.
fun and stuff. I wasn't using them for therapy. I wasn't even feeling like I was getting any therapy out of it. It was more of like an escape and then coming back. And so but one of those times I went home. I tried this substance called dimethyltryptamine, or known as DMT,
Yeah.
and it was the profound experience I ever had in my life. Like I felt like I had left my body and I was in a place that I had been to a million times. It felt like I was home, and there
Mm,
was a presence there that felt like mom. Like,
yeah.
like, not like
Yeah.
my mom, but the
Yeah. Yeah.
feeling of
Yeah.
mother. Like,
Yeah.
and and I just like melted. It felt like it was holding me, and I was like, it felt like a baby being held by God, is what it felt like. I mean, like, and and I had forgot that I had taken a substance, and this had been the only time I'd ever been on drugs or drunk or anything that I didn't have awareness of me being on a substance.
Yes.
Um, but for context, for everyone out there, what I was actually doing on the outside, like what was not, I was just laying there
Yeah.
looking like I was sleeping. So I wasn't
Yeah.
like running around or conscious. It was like I was sleeping.
Yeah.
Um, and I remembered researching this drug, and people had talked about they met God on it, and I was like, well, I was
Yeah.
skeptical, like everyone is. I'm like, okay. But in the experience, I was like, I finally kind of like had this, oh yeah, I'm on this DMT trip.
Yeah.
So I said, I was like, oh, you must be what people are calling God, like
Okay.
this thing
Yeah.
that I'm experiencing.
Yes.
So I threw every question about reality and myself, and I mean anything I could think of that I would want to
Yeah.
ask God, all in,
Yeah.
like, because it was all like this telepathic. It wasn't like I was talking. It was all like in
Yeah.
here. So it was like just this flood of questions flew out of my head at this being, and it was more like an environment, not a being. It wasn't like I was actually being held.
Yeah.
It's very hard to describe, but it didn't have a face, but it felt like it laughed and smiled at me, and then
Mhm.
said, Jared, if you have any questions, you should go to the jungle.
Wow.
And then I basically came out of this experience, and there I was laying on the ground with my friends and my girlfriend there and stuff, um and like tears in my eyes, like blown away, like what just happened. And so I knew about this substance in the jungle called ayahuasca before this, and because ayahuasca, the primary compound of it is DMT as well, like that's the psychoactive compound.
Okay.
So while I was researching DMT, I kind of found ayahuasca. But what I learned about ayahuasca was like, this is not fun. Like, and as I
Yeah.
said before, I was taking psychedelics for like an escape or for fun with my friends, and but what I read about ayahuasca was this was not fun. It involved a very intense diet, and involved a very intense process that would involve with sometimes vomiting or going to the bathroom, or in some really intense, hard experiences from what I read from people. And
Yes.
so with that in mind, I had no desire to go drink ayahuasca. Like I
Yeah.
even told my friends, I was like, I'll never do that. That sounds terrible. Like, why would
Yeah.
I ever do that? But after that experience and hearing that, I was like obsessed. Like I was like, I gotta find out
Yes.
what's in the jungle. So I came back from leave, and I'm sure for you guys, I just come back and I'm ranting and raving about, is what it felt like. I was ranting and raving about this substance called DMT,
Yeah.
and this experience that I had, and
I remember
how
that.
I'm still trying to process it, and how I was looking into this substance called ayahuasca in the jungle, and this lasted a couple of months of me kind of processing this, and then eventually I was like, my next leave block, I'm going to go to the jungle.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out what this is. So I dove myself into research about it, and I realized that there was a diet that needed to be on. So I went on a very strict diet when I was out there, which and I know is hard in
It's very
Iraq.
difficult.
It's
Exactly.
difficult. All I was pretty much eating was chicken and very poorly washed vegetables and very poorly washed lettuce and fish and stuff. And so extremely lean and healthy is what I was trying
Yes.
to eat. Overwatering myself, not drinking, cutting out sugar, all that stuff. And you saw it and everyone else saw it. I lost probably like 20 pounds, like 30 pounds or something.
You got
And
quite hollow.
yeah, I just sank down. Because when you met me, I was probably 235
Yeah.
and like just, I mean, strong, but big,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just really big. And so when I had left for the jungle, I think I had lost about 30 pounds. But during that time when I was looking into doing this diet, I was very afraid of what the experience was going to be like. So I started adding things like meditation into my practice out there, because from what I heard, meditation was something that could help you basically make it through ceremony.
Yeah.
So I put all this stuff in there, and I was learning about mindfulness and philosophy and all this stuff while I was like researching, because people who had taken DMT for some reason started sounding like philosophers and everything. So I was drawn into this scene, all while in Iraq and doing this job with you, because it would just be my off time. I'd go to my room and I would research on the computer, and I'd come back and I'd talk to you guys about it on post. I would just be like about this stuff. And
exactly.
So yeah, and that's what led up to me going to drink ayahuasca on that leave block in April of 2016.
Okay, so you've done all this preparation, everything, and you climb the plane and you fly out there. And how did it go? I mean, what
Man,
did it meet your expectations?
Well, the travel out there was itself, man, was hard, because my girlfriend at the time was a struggling addict, and she was going to go drink ayahuasca with me to help with her addiction. And she had not done any of the preparation work and was not clean when I showed up. And so because of this, getting through the airport with her while she was detoxing was extremely difficult. And at some point, I actually had a fireman carry her through the airport because we were late for our flight. And then we missed our flight, and I had to buy 3, because my other friend came with me. I had to buy 3 more plane tickets to Peru from LA for us to get there. So to actually get there was an odyssey in itself, because not only that, but I had come from a 16-hour flight from Dubai to home. So I mean, like, man, by the time I got there, I think I was like mentally and overly exhausted and just like collapsed. But when I got out there, I mean, it wasn't too far from the airport, but you drive off the main road and you just drive into the jungle for like 20-30 minutes. So you're just like in the deep Amazon jungle, mosquitoes and sloths and bugs and oh my, all types of stuff, all the things of jungle life. And I had done jungle training and operations in the Marine Corps. So, I mean, like, I kind of knew what I was getting into with it, because there was no, this was composting toilets outside, like porta johns outside that you poured sawdust on. And there was like blackouts and not a lot of electricity. And, so it was really rough
Yes,
for people that weren't. I mean, like I had just come from Iraq, so for me, I was like, oh, this is not bad. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
but
At least it's not the heat. Yeah.
yeah, but for me now, living in this palace with this heat and with this
Yeah.
everything else, like and running water and all that, like that would be a stark transition. I can
Yes.
understand. But the experience itself, man, I actually I didn't know what to expect,
Yeah.
but it went beyond anything that I could even comprehend because I don't know how else to put this, man, but I like died out there and was reborn into a new person. And
Okay.
it wasn't even a new person; it was the same person that I have always been, but it was hiding underneath this rough exterior that had to go. And I don't
Jared,
even want to call it go, but get out,
I've,
like move out of the way.
I've heard it described, Jared, as what the experience can do is it allows you to remove a mask that you've been wearing your whole life. Would that describe it? You know.
Yeah, and there's lots of terms for this in the space: ego death, ego transition. The becoming who you truly are, because like our ego is just an identity put together through
Yeah.
experience and external learning. At
Yeah.
that point, like so, I'm this person, I'm this role, and so yeah, it absolutely completely obliterated any role or idea of who I thought I was and left me with just this is who you are.
Okay.
Like for
Okay.
me to actually experience without the storyline of who I thought I was
Mm.
with my childhood and the Marine Corps and contracting and
Yeah.
everything was just kind of, it wasn't deleted, but it was taken to the side
Yeah.
and says, now how do you feel in
Yeah.
a sense? And to get to that place with ayahuasca was a very hard, it was the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life at that
Yeah.
point.
Well, I mean, I, I can imagine because we create this narrative that is our lives, and because we're the narrator, we brush over things that are less flattering and emphasize things that are more so. And to be confronted with this is the stark reality, I think is what you're talking about,
Yes.
and that's I'm completely convinced would make it a really really difficult traumatic almost experience to go through.
Yeah, it was. And thankfully, I had the right facility and facilitators to be there to help me process what
Mm,
I had gone through, so I didn't hold it into a traumatic experience and it
okay.
turned into a growth experience, as
Yeah.
opposed to like that was horrendous and scary and I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah.
And hearing people say like, I know it's that way, but I promise that we're going to make it through this, and this is basically
Yeah.
helping you, as
Yeah.
opposed to like doing it recreationally because I'm trying it and then suddenly it's awful and I'd be like, never ever again I'm doing, like it would, because there's no way I would transition. So I had facilitators and honestly, the shamanic healers that were down there doing this work, they had done things down there that I did not think was possible.
Okay.
I They were literally pulling things out of myself and people in this circle and like getting rid of it. And I could feel it at one point. I was in this space. Now I remember I try to keep one foot on the ground. For everyone listening that doesn't know me, I try to keep one foot on the ground so I don't fucking filter into my own bullshit as much as I can.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I know I was on a substance, but so in one of these ceremonies, I'm sitting there and I can hardly get up. My body is so exhausted from vomiting and crying, and I can't move. And this shaman or this curandero, shaman is not the right word.
Yeah.
This curandero came in front of me and started singing one of his healing songs, and he did this with his hand, like he did this, and
Mm,
suddenly, like without me doing it, my body sat up on its own, straight up, and I'm staring at him. And he does this with his hand, and my head goes this way. And then he pulls from a distance. He's like kind of 6 feet in front of me, or
yeah.
4 feet in front of me. He pulls like this, and I can feel this this energy coming from, this feeling coming from like my groin wrapped around my spine, and he pulls it out, and I can feel it all the way coming out of my body physically, and then he
Mm.
throws it away and blows it like this, and it was gone. And I felt incredible. Like it felt like a chronic pain, a chronic emotional pain had been completely released from me. Like I was
Wow.
like, it was, and I still to this day don't know what that was, or nor do I care. But it
Yeah,
was, but
it's gone.
it was something that was real, that happened to me, that really, that I couldn't honestly get over. And that actually filters in farther into my story about why I went back.
Mm.
Because I experienced these things, that blew my mind, that people were using this medicine from a distance, not touching me, but singing at me and using it to heal me in some way. And that to
Okay.
me was incredible.
So let me sort of not quite play devil's advocate, but like just respond to this in a way that I know people will want to
Yes.
ask. There are two things that occurred to me. The first one is, um, you and I both are very pragmatic people. Pragmatic in the sense of we've seen a lot of the sort of the veil pulled aside about the convenient lies that society tells about, you know, all kinds of things, because we were exposed to a lot more raw in the sense of being in the military and the places that we've been. So we're very pragmatic, and hearing you talk about this stuff is interesting, and I feel a resonance to that. That sounds amazing. It really does. The question that I have is, um, you're screwing with your brain chemistry. So, um, in the moment, you're under the influence of what you're taking, and
Mm-hmm.
you're experiencing these things because your brain chemistry has been changed in
Mm-hmm.
that moment. Um, what about subsequent to that? What about 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years after that experience? Has that actually made a substantive change to the way you think about things, the way you feel about yourself? Do the masks come back, or you hear what I'm asking?
Yes, I do. So first, let me state that I screw with my brain chemistry every day when I smoke and I
For
drink
sure,
a cup of coffee.
for sure. Yeah,
And I screw with my brain chemistry when I smoke a joint, or when I'm putting food in my system. So just for that argument, I just want that to be said, is that like,
okay.
so everybody is screwing with their brain chemistry every day.
Yes.
Not to that extreme. I'm not saying like you're taking a substance that's super psychoactive.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, there has been 100% a lasting change in my life that feels for the better.
Okay.
Um, since that experience, I feel like I have been cultivating more and more um, acceptance for myself and inner peace for myself than I even knew was possible in life. My
Mm.
anger has diminished down to what I would call healthy, meaning like
Yeah.
I get angry for real reasons, for real at real times, for not just at myself or the world, like just for real things.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like I have an emotional maturity about me that understands when I'm just being emotional and need to talk versus need to do.
Yes.
Um, but mostly, man, I'll just say like I am much happier with me today than I was ever in my entire life since that experience. And that alone was so intriguing to me that I needed to find out why I felt that way, because I really wanted to know how the hell 9 days and 4 ceremonies in the jungle
Mm.
changed me so drastically, because it just didn't make any sense.
Yes.
And so there wasn't a lot of research out there in 2016. There was a lot of research being done, but nothing that was being like released yet.
Mm.
Now there is actually much more research done clinically about ayahuasca and what it does. And what they have been finding is that it actually encourages in neurogenesis in the brain. So people with TBIs, for instance, can use things like ayahuasca or psychedelics, because they find that all classical psychedelics use that create this stimulus in the brain that actually encourages neurogenesis to heal parts of the brain that have been injured. And your brain can be injured from more than just physical acts. We hold on to trauma, and that trauma creates new pathways that allow us to work and function more properly, which is why sometimes someone gets attacked by a dog, and then 20 years later they hear a dog bark and they go into a panic attack. It's because that wire is crossed in the brain that says, like, this means I'm going to get hurt if I hear this noise. So same thing with us as veterans, and noises and smells and sounds and stuff when they have a traumatic event that's attached to them. So what this actually can do is it will hyper stimulate that part of the brain and then create new neurons around it and create an experience for me during that time that allows me to see the experience from a third person perspective, in a sense, like be able to pragmatically look at Jared, the experience, his life, what was going on, and understand it as an observer as opposed to the character.
Okay.
And so that is why I think, because that awareness of me being the narrator and the narration, like knowing that after that experience altered my perspective on how I manage my life and the stories that I tell myself every day about who I think I really am.
Yeah. Okay. So the second part of the question that I have is that all right. So you're talking about the actual chemical psychoactive and the physical effect it has on you. And you spoke about using DMT recreationally, and you had this experience and what have you. And I know that there are a lot of people who don't go to Peru and they don't go through the ceremony and they don't sit with the shamanistic sort of guidance that they do, and they take this stuff. I know about all kinds of people in all kinds of places, and then they take the stuff and they don't have quite the same experience. So what I'm thinking, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's almost a 50-50, 70-30, I don't know. The chemical experience and the guidance, the counseling, whatever. How does that sort of fit together?
So as I was saying before, when I was working with psychedelics recreationally, I had all kinds of problems going on in my life. It didn't solve any of them. It didn't even give me awareness of them. But when I was doing them with friends around a campfire or at a party or, lots of external distractions for me not to look at myself, which is what we do every day. I don't think I'm any different than anybody else, that being by myself in a room quiet to think about myself is not the most fun thing for me. I'd much rather be scrolling on my phone or reading something or playing something or anything other than thinking about my problems or what I got to fix.
For sure.
So the using them in that setting. Now, in that setting, I have heard of people still having profound breakthroughs. Like they took more than they thought they did, or like something happened and they like had this experience. So I'm not saying that can't or is not happening, because it is. But if you are looking for healing, if you want to use these things as a tool, which is what they are, for us as humans, pretty much everything out there can be a tool. We can learn to use it for whatnot, but this can be a tool, and it has been used as a tool for thousands of years throughout culture. And before the westernization of the world, psychedelics were used commonly amongst all cultures around the world. So this was something that it's only been in the last 200 to 300 years where it's been really suppressed. And so we're coming out of that awakening right now, hopefully, or maybe not, I don't know, but people are doing them still to this day. So to answer your question, now I've had experience in my life where these are done in more of a therapeutic setting, with a guide, with a space, with intention, with a preparation practice involved with it before you go, and then a time frame to process when you come back and you're home, because that maximizes the amount of progress that you can make on with your work on yourself if you
Yeah.
incorporate help, because asking for help from people is part of the healing. And
Yes.
also, I just said it right at the beginning of this podcast, man. We're herd animals. We
Absolutely.
are meant to heal together. No man
Absolutely.
is an island. Like that's just not how this works. Like, so having another individual there that is trained or knows what they're doing in that space to be able to guide you through it if something were to go in a negative sense or
Yeah.
into a good sense, or someone to be there to talk to, that is a game changer for people with psychedelics.
Okay.
So like the next term that you probably hear a lot is, what about bad trips? And that's been a term that's been going on for a long time, but I want to speak to it saying that I think that there's no such thing as a bad trip. There can be very hard ones, but there can be bad settings. There can
Yeah.
be bad mindsets.
Yeah.
There can be bad like experiences that happen. Like for me, you have a bad trip at a festival. Well, that was a bad setting, man.
Yeah.
Like you were just around a
Oh,
lot of people
no, for
and like
sure.
out of your mind. Like you're
Yeah.
at a festival.
Jared, um, but before I started this thing with you, I've been thinking about it because I've gone through basically the last year where I've been doing a lot of introspection and rebuilding and what have you. And one of the moments of epiphany for me was when I came to this realization that where I am now, at the age I am now, I'm looking back and I'm saying, I've made a certain number of choices in my life that have matched the narrative that I built. But is that really me? And
Mhm.
if I had chosen at critical junctures throughout my life to make different choices, I could be, a completely different person. So that's like an existential crisis that
Yes.
I've literally been dealing with. And I think what you're talking about, and this is coming to the question, is that something like this, the experience that you first had in the jungle, was to actually bring that existential crisis to an acute point
Yes.
where you had no other option but to deal with it. Would that be an accurate reflection?
Yes. And that's why I would say I died out there, is because
Yes.
when it did come to that point, which I know for any of us out there who are struggling with a change that we know needs to occur, but don't know how to do it,
Mm-hmm.
that existential crisis comes along and it feels like you're going to die.
Yeah.
And it feels like the only way out is death.
Yeah.
And what I think this substance gave me was that identity. It gave that identity a righteous death, because
Okay.
that warrior in me did not want to go unless it got its death.
Yes.
And the interesting thing was is that my first ceremony was really gentle and fun, actually. I mean, I felt like I was having a conversation with God. It was really
Yes.
cool, and really trippy. But I want to let you know, as I'm explaining this is anybody out there who's thinking about doing this or is like, oh, this sounds interesting, and
Mhm.
everybody's experiences is different. So
Yes.
you're not going to get what Jared got. You're going to
Yeah.
get what you got, if you go.
Exactly.
So my first experience out there was really gentle. Like it was really, really nice. I felt like I was talking with a friend who was giving me information, and it felt like it was
Mm.
downloading me, like almost like
Yeah.
getting a sense of who I was.
Yeah.
Second ceremony, man, it just killed me. I mean, like I fought all night. And it was trying to get me to let go of my identity, of
Mm.
like of who I thought I was, and it was taking certain things from me and even making fun of certain aspects of my life, trying to get me to like get to play jokes with it. Because man, you remember who I was before. I was really angry.
I
Like I
know.
was really angry at the world, at everybody. I would blow up. Like I would get really angry, and so that was me trying to protect this identity that I had. And so my response in the medicine was to fight, because that's all I knew what
Mhm.
to do.
Exactly.
Um, and so what it did was it wore me out. It wore me out to the point where I had nothing, no fight left in me, and then left me at ceremony, basically this close to death is what it felt like. And I mean, like I was so out of it that my girlfriend had to I had to lean on my girlfriend, and she walked me to the shower and washed me down. because I was covered in my own stuff, like and I went back to my room and I curled up in the fetal position and just cried like a baby. Like I just felt, I mean, like I was just obliterated. And I had another ceremony that next day. And I had to ask myself, like, this is where I actually was happy with my Marine training, was because like I knew the next day was probably gonna suck. But I was like, I'm gonna do this because it was so hard. But so the next day I felt like I was like, all right, I'm gonna get into this thing, and she ain't gonna win this time. Like I'm gonna win. and I called it a she because it was just easier. So like it's not gonna win this time. And so I went into ceremony, and I had this vision of this woman sitting in this room, like in this dark space, just sitting there. And so I had this vision of me running at her and just screaming and kicking and flailing and punching. And I had like my kid on and everything. And eventually it started feeling like I was punching a pillow.
Yeah.
And like I just started getting so tired that I couldn't like. And just so everyone knows, I was laying there. This is a vision. This is like a daydream or something that I was experiencing. And I got so tired that I eventually just like laid down next to her. And then she looked at me and said, okay, now we can talk.
Huh.
And what I learned from that experience was what she was showing me was how to surrender to the force of others or the world coming at me, and letting them have their process of anger or their letting the world go through its process. And when it's ready to talk to me, we can talk.
Okay.
But if I get pulled into all of that going on, then I am not at a place where I'm ready to talk because I'm in my process now.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So that's what I learned from that, because as soon as I was finally done and I had my cathartic anger release and there was nothing left in the tank, then I could hear. Then I could hear what the conversation was. And the rest of that night, I got a lot of information about what kind of a person I really am.
Yeah.
And what kind of a person I deserve to be for myself.
Yeah.
And it was really simple stuff, John. Like, you're really just, you're kind. You're a kind person. You like to help people.
Yeah.
You don't allow yourself to be this way because of this, and you don't need to do that. And there was even a part in that ceremony where you're lucky, man. I never talk about this, because I don't talk about trip reports. So like there was a time in my ceremony where so I was when I was 16, I had suicidal ideation at 16.
Yeah.
And my dad had guns in the house and everything else, and no one was home. And I got my dad's shotgun, and I was gonna kill myself. And I called my best friend Derek at the time, because I knew where I was at, and he drove to the house as soon as he could. Got home, moved the gun away from me, and then we sat and talked. And then he, being the good friend that he is, told my parents, as he should have,
Absolutely.
he should have. My dad had already lost a son to a car accident when his son was 2 years old, before I was born. So his response was very afraid that he couldn't protect me from myself. So he decided that he needed to get the firearms out of the house and give them to my grandfather for a while I'm processing.
Yes.
A smart move. But my dad, being afraid and doing what men normally do when they're afraid, he gets angry.
Of course.
And as he's loading these guns up into the car, he's blaming me for not being able to protect his family because I have a fucking problem.
Yeah.
And I look back at this now and I understand where my dad was coming from, and I don't hold anything against him, but that caused some real damage to me at that time. And I went to my room and I cried at 16 by myself, and just felt terrible, because I was like, I just hated myself because I felt like I put my family in danger. I felt like my problems were now becoming a hindrance for all types of stuff. So anyways, that's the context. So in this experience, I appear as my 30-year-old self, and there I am sitting on my bed as a 16-year-old self crying.
Yeah.
And my 16-year-old self looks up at me and sees me and recognizes who I am, and I get to sit down with that person and tell him it's all right, man. it's totally fine, and that like you're gonna be okay, and that like you just keep
Jared,
going, dude, and everything. Like and I hugged him, and we cried together, and man, I mean I had an experience where I got to heal an inner child version of myself, and I mean like that. I don't know what to do with that, but it created major positive ripples in my life. Let's just say,
Jared, man, that is so moving. Um, honestly, miraculous that you could get to experience that, and no matter what it was that brought you to that point, miraculous. I, I said something. I did this other interview about 2 months back now, and it was on the 11th of November, and I made a comment on there, which I've had quite a few people message me about, where I said part of this journey is getting to a point where we can say with true honesty that, for example, because there's lots of examples, but for example, it's okay to be sad as men,
mm-hmm.
specifically as men, because we deal with the stuff, as you say, we project it into anger and into all kinds of other things. But we are so accustomed to being told, cowboys don't cry,
Yes,
suck it up, etc., etc., and getting to a point where you can honestly say to yourself or to somebody else, like you to me or me to you, one of our brothers, we can say it's okay to be sad.
mm-hmm.
Is ready for me. That was one of my epiphanous moments when I figured this out, where it's like this is the 11th of November. It's Remembrance Day. This is the day that I think about um, the various people that I've lost along the way. Not only those who were KIA, but the 47 people in the last 6 years of my mates that have committed suicide,
Yeah,
um, and all the others outside that. But we talk about our own inner circle,
yes,
and it's okay to be sad. So that is very difficult. I mean, as a
yeah,
guy, I mean, even saying I've got PTSD, there's a lot of the people in the community who are like, "Oh, PTSD is bullshit. You're just a sissy if you got this," and they
yep,
they 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 actually deny the validity of what you're experiencing. Okay, so that brings me to the question to say, um, um, I know we're sort of skipping ahead and we're
no,
not
it's
following
fine.
things chronologically, but I think this is important is to say, all right, so you're this is your practice now. This is what you're doing is helping people deal with these things. So I'd really like to hear from your experience what you think about this. So I've got a mate, Bob, okay, and Bob is going through suicidal ideation. He's trashed his marriage. He's he's drinking, binge drinking to excess. Any one of those markers,
Yep.
and he's at that point. And I had a dude, one of my mates, phone me a couple of weeks ago saying, "I'm sitting in my car with my side on my hand. I just want to say goodbye." And it took me 4 hours to talk him down. So when you get people at that point, would you say to them, well, what would you say to them? Take a psychedelic, go through the forest,
No.
travel to. You hear what I'm saying to you. So,
Yeah.
what is the process? Where does this fit in to this
So
like continuum of care that we as brothers need to find for each other?
so if someone is actively in a state of suicidal ideation, this would not be a time when I would say, "Come over to my house and let's take some mushrooms."
Exactly.
I it, it so let me explain something about psychedelics that is my own experience. It's not like a published thing. Maybe someone's got something out there, but from my experience with people and myself is psychedelics are a destabilizer. They
Okay.
destabilize your narrative
Yeah.
for you to hopefully get a clear picture of what in your life actually is stable.
Okay.
So if you already have a ton of instability in your life,
Mm.
psychedelics will probably bring all of that into the forefront of your mind
Yeah.
about what you have been avoiding doing and can
Mm.
actually spiral you out more.
Yes.
And this is why people that are in this active state, and if they do take psychedelics, it's important that they have trained facilitators around to help you if you drop into a manic state here.
Yes.
So you're safe in a sense, like that you're safe to
Yes.
have a cathartic release. But I would not recommend it at all. For
Yeah.
me, I've had friends who have been actively suicidal ideation, and they have called me knowing that I'm the guy that they can talk to about
Yeah.
psychedelics for help.
Yes.
And so if they ask me about it, the first thing I would say is, well, man, first let's get you at a stable place.
Yes.
Like first let's get
Stop
you,
the bleeding.
yeah. So
Stop the
like,
bleeding.
so your wife just kicked you out. You're in your car with your sidearm and you're drunk. All right,
Yeah.
man, where are you?
Yeah.
Let's get you picked up.
Exactly.
And then for me, I have a network of people that I can introduce them to get them stable, to get
Yes.
them to at least, I don't know about physically or financially stable, but
But
mentally like, okay, I'm ready to actually do some work on myself, stable.
yeah. Yeah.
And I would introduce them to a coach or a therapist or clinics or whatever. I would use the full power of the network that I have to try to
Yes.
help them. And
Yeah.
and that goes for anybody out there, because normally I'm the network person that someone will call me and say, Jared, I have a friend who's in suicide, and I'll give them
Yes.
a list of places that they can go.
Fantastic.
So I want to get them stable, and then yes, then I will talk to them about if they're ready or wanting to try
Mm.
this,
Okay.
especially if they've tried a lot of other things, John. You know, like
Yeah.
if they've gone through the health system and tried, you know, antidepressants, if they've tried therapy, if they've tried breath work, if they've tried everything,
Everything else. Yes.
what else do you got to lose by trying
Exactly.
this?
Exactly.
Especially if you especially taking them in these settings is extremely safe, especially if you don't
Yeah.
have any underlying heart or health issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're relatively healthy, these are very safe medicines.
Okay.
They're safer than opiates,
Yeah.
and they're safer than Tylenol even. So like our body processes them very well is what I'm trying to say. Like it's the
Okay.
overdose for them is extremely high. Like you'd have to take more than your body could actually take in to for them to like cannabis, like overdosing on THC. It's not impossible, but
Yeah.
it's
Very.
you gotta basically
Yeah.
have lungs like a dump truck to do it. So
No,
but
I thought I thought it was important to ask, and I think it's extremely important to hear your answer, which is this is not a panacea. Don't rush out and take it
no,
thinking
God
it's going to
no,
fix your life.
it's
Okay.
not a magic bullet at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
it wasn't a magic bullet for me. I'll tell you, John. And I guess the next part of it is when I came back
Yes.
from Peru. I was very shiny is the word I'd pick it. I was very happy and very shiny. And I was actively trying to make big changes in my life
Mm.
while I was out there, and I think I successfully did. But man, it didn't make my anger go away.
No.
It didn't make my problems go away. It didn't make the nagging thoughts go away.
Yeah.
But what it did is it gave me awareness around those
Mm.
and some compassion for myself and other people that
Yeah.
did not exist before. And that made me being able to work on myself much easier, because I was much more gentle on myself. Instead of saying like, Jared, you should be here, I was
Mm.
going, I'm here.
Yes.
That's
And
it.
I can work towards being there. It's a it's kind of like a softening. It's kind of like you spray water in the garden to break
Yes.
to make the soil workable. I hear you. I hear you quite clearly. All right. So after that first experience, you came back to Balat to Iraq, and and
Oh, um,
that must have been quite bizarre. A bit of a
it
cognitive
was
dissonance.
actually, cause like I thought that like when I left the jungle that I was like, how am I going to take this back to my life? Because my
Mm.
life at that point was living in Balad with you. You know,
Yeah,
like that was it. Like
that was home.
that was home, and you
Yeah,
guys were like friends and family to me at that point.
yeah,
And I know a lot of you were actually very wanting to know
for
how it
sure,
went.
for sure.
And so like, but I felt very peaceful, which meaning to say like I didn't feel like I needed to go out and want to get into a fight anymore.
Yes.
which was a main motivation for me wanting to be in Iraq. Was like, heck yeah, if a fight's coming, I'll be there. Like, but then it became more about my intention going back to Iraq was really just to be with you guys.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I was like, oh well, I'd like to go out there and at least see them again and tell
Oh,
them about it, because there was a point, John, that I was like, maybe I don't want to come back. Maybe I'll
yeah.
just stay home.
Yeah.
And but so I asked, actually, in ceremony, I so it's interesting. Sometimes you can get answers, like you can get questions and answers in the
Mm.
medicine space. So you can ask, you can be like, oh, what color is this sky? It'll tell you blue
Yeah.
or green or whatever, right? So I asked for some guidance on, like, should I go back to this contract in Iraq? And the answer I got was, you know what to do. And so pretty much like, don't lean on me to make your decisions for you.
Exactly.
And I but I did. I knew exactly what to do. I went back. I actually stayed an extra week home because I just felt like I needed to just decompress from what I
Yeah.
experienced. And I got back, and man, I had decided that when I got back, I was not going to be ruled by my anger anymore,
Mm.
and that I was going to be honest as much as I could, all the time with everyone about
Yeah.
my stuff, and honestly, listen more
Yeah.
to people. And so I went out there, and and I've described this a lot on different podcasts and different times, but it went from being on a contract in Iraq. This is the story in my mind. It went from being on a contract in Iraq to going home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not even returning there. It was after time, because after time of me being there, because I was back out there for 10 months before I left again. And so I started seeing the Iraqis we were working with as people and not Iraqis.
Yes.
I started talking with you all and learning about your culture and your life, and started becoming very close with you all, having deep conversations about life, spirituality, sex, drugs, rock and roll, the
Yeah.
whole thing. Like just really opening myself to
Yeah.
other people, which gave me the impression of feeling like I was home, which was
Yeah.
just being loved, accepted,
For
and
sure.
seen for who I am.
For sure.
And
Um,
I felt that reciprocated on a lot of occasions. Now, there was some people out there who called me a hippie and stopped wanting to talk to me, but
I know. I can probably name them.
but
Um,
here's the part: is I didn't even care. I was like, okay,
oh,
that's fine.
so as you're talking, I'm having this thought, and I'm thinking, you know what? Um, Coincidentally, and there's no such thing as coincidence, but coincidentally, I suspect that the 10, 11 months that you had after coming back out of the jungle back to Balat gave you time to truly process the experience, in a highly structured environment with that
Yes,
rigid schedule, with a rigid sort of job in a lot of ways, but also even the rigid job had a lot of wriggle room where
yeah,
drove around the vehicles and we do the CQB stuff and we blah 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 blah. But it was, not heavy distractions.
yeah,
Everything was kind of predictable in a lot of ways. And I'm guessing, and I'm asking you, do you think that maybe had a almost a disproportionate effect on you stabilizing yourself into a new reality, having taken off the masks, figuring out how far you can push it, what changes there actually are, that kind of stuff. Whereas if you'd gone straight back into your civilian environment, you would have had 10,000 distractions. Does
yeah.
that make sense to you?
No, you are hitting it right on the head. I've said this a lot, and I don't think that it's an easy concept, because I tell people I drank ayahuasca and then went back to Iraq, and people's eyes get like this big, and they're like, "How did you do that?" And they're thinking I'm like running and gunning in Baghdad,
Wow.
and
And it
and I'm
was.
and I'm not. I mean, I tell them I'm like, it was a very quiet contract. It
Yes.
was very rigid and routine, and I said
Yes.
all I did when I went out there was I added things like contemplation,
Mm.
meditation, yoga, studying philosophy.
Time to reshare that photograph again.
Yeah, and that's when that photograph was taken.
I think it's appropriate that we reshare this photograph and just take a minute to actually appreciate just how epic it is.
Yeah, and this photo I took of myself when I was in the center of that routine that I had made for myself.
Yeah.
And I was meditating about 30 minutes to an hour a day, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. I was studying Descartes and Alan Watts and philosophy and looking up religious scriptures. And to be honest, John, what I was trying to do was figure out what had happened to me. Like,
Yeah.
like I was so different than I was before. Like
Yeah.
I had no idea what had happened to me, but I liked it. I mean, like I really
Well, I mean,
liked it.
but this is the point, because let me just do this very quickly. So, this is kind of the contrast. The kind of the before and after. We showed you the after. This is kind of the before.
Yeah, this was taken on my Afghan contract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, figuring out what's happened to you is exactly the point. I think is that you went through this epiphanous, life changing event, and it takes time to process that. If that makes sense. I
No,
mean,
it totally does, which is something I tell all the veterans I work with now that work with
yeah,
psychedelics is it takes time for
yeah,
you to process all this. Like it just
exactly,
takes time and
exactly.
some directed effort, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's hard to do.
you have to want to go that way. Like and so I felt really privileged, to be honest, because I kind of went into a structured ashram for myself in a sense where like I could add these things and not be distracted uh,
And,
by friends, family, the news. Like the world could be on fire when I was in Iraq, and it didn't matter because
and tough shit. Yeah.
yeah, I'm here. What am I going to do? I can't fly out of here.
Well. What's so interesting about that is, it actually took me quite a long time to readjust not being in Baghdad, because you had 16 hours a day. That was your time. Well, other than on and off shift, but 16 hours a day where you can choose to sleep. You can, for the entire time. You can.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to bug you. Honey-do list. Please take out the trash.
Yep.
Change a light bulb. Nobody's going to give you. Nobody's going to say, "Listen, there's a funny noise in the car." It's. I mean, not even the smallest distraction. You could literally close the door, and the only sound you'd hear would be the sound of the aircon. And
Yep.
that's a unique
Yeah, it
opportunity
was.
in a lot of ways.
It was, and I think it was a really unique privilege that I got to have for my integration,
Mm,
and I think that because of that time that I spent out there
mm,
integrating and processing and trying to see what fits and what doesn't,
mm.
really propelled me into my life into having really positive directions. And honestly, I would like to say I'd say you had a part of that, John. Like you helped me with that with the conversations we had and the times that we had together, and you just honestly being open and accepting me for the weird changes that you were seeing. Like so.
It's funny. I literally I remember the two of us on opposite teams. I think you were like Quebec 1 and I was Quebec 2 or whatever it was. And we'd met up for coffee or whatever, and we're standing at the fence and gazing out at the Euphrates River, and talking about some of the weirdest shit, and really enjoying it, and those are great memories for me.
Yeah.
It's that kind of idea that people have of army. It's all about shooting and stuff. And the story that I tell is, I say, you're going to spend 100 times more polishing your boots than you are being anywhere near your weapon.
Yeah.
And I think that this is what we're talking about. Is that you know for you and I both, the journey has been, how do I actually learn to garden?
Mm-hmm.
How I am this warrior. This is an integral part of my life experience. How do I actually act as a gardener? No, not right. How do I be a gardener in a garden, even though I'm still a warrior? And I think that this is approaching what you're talking about as well, is actually being that, not just acting it.
Well, first when you're gardening, you've got to figure out what you want to grow
Yeah.
and what you want to cultivate in your life. And if we're using the garden analogy for life, a lot of us got this really huge plot of land that we can garden on, but it's filled with a lot of invasive species, which
Yeah.
we can call addictions. They're
Yeah.
filled with anger, which grows immensely like tall trees. It starts really small and then turns into an oak. So
Yeah.
how you become a gardener is you need to look at your space, take account of where
Yeah.
you are at in your life. And
Yeah.
like for me, John, like I said, like when I left the jungle, I told myself, I want to cultivate more peace in my life. Like
Fantastic.
I just want more peace. And 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 to me, even saying the word peace, like I can't even describe what peace is, but I know what it feels like.
Yes.
Like it's contentment, acceptance, homeostasis, like peace. And I just said I wanted more of that in my life. So that was the metaphorical plant that I
Yeah.
decided that I was going to keep growing. And I was starting to find the roots of anger were getting in the way of the roots of my peace. So I had to start
Okay.
cultivating
Like,
these different plants in different ways. But first I had to figure out what land I was working with and what kind of
yes.
soil I'm working with and what kind of,
Yes.
so learn about me, learn about
Yes.
this being and this body and this person and its wants and desires and all that stuff. And then I can start gardening.
No, that's 100%. It's 100%. Now, I think it's hugely important to understand yourself and to understand what it is you want to achieve. You can't work towards a goal unless you know what that goal is going to be. Um, okay, so the contract comes to an end. You leave Iraq permanently. What, 2018 as well? You
Uh,
also left
that was
20.
it was the beginning of 2017 is when I left.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right. Because I was still there till the end of 2018, so I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember.
Yeah,
So
I left right at the beginning because I went home in December, I think, of 2017.
okay. So you get home, and now you've been through this process. You've started rebuilding yourself in a lot of ways. You've got a bunch of structures. You've got a lot of plants that are growing, but they're still seedlings. They haven't
Yep.
quite
Yeah.
into trees yet. And now you get into civilian life, and what then?
So I still had not um, dealt with my fear of integrating back into civilian life. Like
That's why I'm asking.
I didn't deal with that when I was in Iraq. So instead of dealing with it, I decided that I wanted to learn more about this experience that I had gone through, and not knowing what to do next, I was going to go back to the jungle and kind of get a refresher with the medicine, not for like a tremendous healing, but really just for kind of like a reorienting, so to speak, like kind of
Yeah,
get my feet back on the ground, and because it helped me so much the last time with getting some direction.
yeah,
Um, and I got asked to stay on as a facilitator in the jungle before I came out there, and I had never facilitated before. Or what facilitation is basically is a person that helps the shaman out in Peru while he or she is doing their work. We are out helping to change buckets or to help people if they're in a process, or to make sure people are safe and are are okay through their process, and then
yeah,
also communicating and helping them process when they're out of that, when they're
yeah.
walking around and doing those and being on the center. Um, so I had four more ceremonies, and then, man, let's just call it off to the races, because for the next year, um, I was put into a very rigorous shamanic training that was, I call it rigorous. It was rigorous emotionally and energetically more than physically, because physically, man, I was living in the jungle with a bunch of hippies and we were happy. Like we were just
Yes.
blissed, man. It was it felt amazing because it was just
Awesome.
chill all day. People were always happy. I mean, everyone was always like so good to be around, and people would come to the center from all over the world, from all
Yeah.
different walks of life, and it felt like I was at a human library because I'd
Yeah.
go there and I'd learn so much from all of these people. Some of them were millionaires, some of them were billionaires, some of them were poor people who had saved 10 years to do this. Some of them have been traveling the world for the last 10 years and have been to ashrams and temples, and man, stories upon stories upon stories, and all this, like, and then helping them through all that. Because after hearing all these stories as a facilitator, I got to see the people behind these stories because they all had the same stuff going on. They all didn't love themselves. They all were having problems at home. They all weren't happy with what was going on in their life. They all were trying to find contentment and acceptance and peace. They all different walks of life, military, non-military, hippie, boxers, fighters. I mean, all of them. Same thing. And that really made me start looking at myself as, and the human race as a lot like we're the same, you know?
Yeah.
Like in that made me kind of soften even more. But to kind of get back to what I was saying, the rigorous process that I was going through was I was drinking ayahuasca probably 3 to 4 times a week for that year that I was out there. Because I thought that when I got out there and was going to learn about the plants and learn about ayahuasca and learn about this process, it was going to be kind of like a Westerner idea where you're doing a left seat, right seat thing where like you're sitting next to the guy and you don't get to do the thing until he tells you you're ready and all that stuff. Not how shamanic culture works in Peru. They say you want to learn about ayahuasca, drink ayahuasca. You want to learn about this plant, you diet that plant. And they have a special way of dieting plants, which is like basically fasting for a long period of time and taking only on that plant and water for about 8 days to a month. That depends. And you can learn and have visions and communicate with this plant. And trust me, again, I'm going to say it again. I have a foot on the ground, I promise. But had I not experienced this for myself, I would not be saying it, that this is a true thing. And communication does not mean words. It can mean lots of other ways of communicating with this, but understanding what the plant is communicating is what you can get from the diets. I can go down a rabbit hole with the stuff that I learned out there, man. That's really far out there that made me as a Westerner, made my skin crawl. Cause it was just like, there's no way that this is the way it is. But had I not experienced it, going through that itself and seeing a different side of this actual reality that was occurring in front of me. And honestly, man, I would say at points, sometimes miraculous stuff, like people coming down with stage 3 cancer and then coming back home and telling us it was cured. People having TBIs that were uncurable, that were making them have tics. And suddenly after 3 ceremonies, there was no more tics, you know, like profound stuff. And then also not so profound stuff, people getting not a lot of things out of it, you know, like feeling like they didn't get their miraculous healing and feeling really disappointed. So it really gave me a fishbowl view of different cultures of the world, and also gave me a safe space for me to just hammer in on my own self-work, on really looking at myself and really wondering, what kind of person do I want to live like? If I have to have an identity, what kind of identity do I want?
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean that sounds like the most awesome opportunity. I'm guessing there's a lot of people who are jealous of you having that opportunity.
I'm sure that there are, man. It was a rare one that I had because I was not married and I didn't have kids, and I had.
I know we all pay the costs. I have similar issues as well, but I was saying it for a reason. And so yes, you can be envied for having that experience. It was a wonderful experience, but from what I see is that you've taken that now and you are now paying that forward in what you're doing.
Yeah.
the Heroic Hearts project. Obviously, this like segues directly into your involvement with them and what you're doing now.
So after my year in the jungle, I left the center that I was working and living at, and I got invited to this retreat in Iquitos, Peru, that was going to be a documentary about veterans and psychedelics. I had always wanted to make a documentary about veterans and psychedelics. I didn't have the know-how to do it or the drive. So this
Yeah.
kind of came along and I was like, yes, I want to go to this. And
Yeah.
so I went and at that retreat, I say this a lot. I met the two most influential and important people in my life. That's Jesse Gould. He's my one of my best friends, and he's the one. Him and I founded Heroic Hearts Project together. And I also met my wife at that same retreat, and we've now been living in Missouri together since that time. Like so, but so in so after I left the jungle, after that time I left the jungle, that is when I actually needed to deal with what we were talking about, being a civilian again.
Yes.
Really going back and getting the job and doing that work and like actually going back into society now, not just being a guy in the jungle or a guy in Iraq, like going and doing and participating. And that was hard, man. That was really hard. And it wasn't as hard as as it probably would have been because I wasn't as self-destructive as I was anymore. So it was hard work, but I had geared it towards like, this is good for me, as opposed to like, I don't want to change. And so
attitude makes a big difference.
Yeah, a huge difference. A growth mindset versus a victim mindset. That's where I was. I was in a growth mindset where I was before was a victim mindset. Nobody understands me. The world is against me. I don't need to change. The world needs to change. That concept.
I hear you.
I met Jesse at that retreat, and then about a year later, I had tried to go to school. School didn't work out. I really didn't like it. I tried working. Actually, I tried to stay unemployed as long as possible. Is really what I tried to do. So I moved to my girlfriend's, my now wife's house in that first year back. And then I get a call from Jesse, and he says, "Hey, Jared, I got this organization started, and I'd like some help with it, and I need a coach to help with the veterans going through our program." And what the program is basically his idea is we're going to send veterans to work with ayahuasca for healing PTSD or mental or physical problems. And we wanted to create an organization around that. And he said, we're going to need a coach. And I was like, what's a coach? Because I didn't have one. I mean, I didn't know these things existed for this space. And he told me, he's like, oh, well, you'd be the guy that would help assist them before they go, and then probably go down there with them sometimes, and then come back, and then also help them to integrate that. And I was like, oh, well, I'm already doing that. Like, okay, like that's my friends who were taking psychedelics. I was already helping them prep and process and so he paid for me to go through this course because I was broke at this point. He paid for me to go to this course to get certified as a coach. And after my certification, I started coaching. I was the only coach for Heroic Hearts Project, and that was back in 2017. Now it's 2024. And we were running probably like maybe 2 or 3 retreats. No, not even, probably 2 retreats in 2017, 2018. Now we're running upwards of like 3 to 4 retreats a month.
Wow.
We served over 260 veterans last year.
Wow.
I have a cohort of coaches that are underneath me now that I'm managing. They're about 40 coaches. We have a very robust online integration program that we use that includes 3 months. Well, it's basically like 2.5 months of integration work where you are prepping for a month with individual calls and group calls, and then then you go to your experience with your group, and then you come back, and then you got another 1.5 to 2 months of coaching for group and individual coaching to make sure that you're on the right path. And if someone were to need more help, we provide that with therapy or coaching or anything else. So we don't just cut them off after their time frame. So if someone, we work with people as long as they need to through this process to make sure that they can get their feet back on the ground and they can hopefully get back to a better life.
That sounds fantastic, Jerry. It really does.
Oh man, it's been a labor of love, and sometimes a bit scary because we were around through COVID and we didn't know what we were going to do because we could but we figured it out, and we seem to be helping a lot of people, and it seems to be coming back to us because we financially we're growing. We're still a small nonprofit, which means that every conversation that I have with anybody is always like, please donate afterwards, because we need it, because every little bit helps.
I will add your stuff in the description when I post this. So hopefully there'll be some viewers from this that'll help you out.
And this is also international as well. So if you have anybody that you know that is interested in it, that is wanting to be a part of this, we are not opposed to flying people to Peru from where their location is, or helping them with plane tickets to fly if they need to as well. So just to let that out there for your audience.
Okay, fantastic. All right. I think that's kind of full circle. And I think we can call it quits there. Not that I want to. I'm having such fun chatting to you, seriously, and I think we must do this again.
Yeah, we can come on and do a different topic that's less about my story, and we can dive into other things. Yeah.
So I have some ideas, and I have some people lined up, and every time I come up, I've got a list, and I look at this list and I go, but those three would make a fantastic panel. And that would be maybe something interesting as well, getting different perspectives to talk about some of these issues. I think we all benefit from it. Rising tide floats all boats. I think we all benefit from it. So any last words from you before we shut it down?
Nothing except for, man, it's been so good to catch up and see you and to do this. I really appreciate you letting me use the platform to talk about myself all day. But John, from the bottom of my heart, man, it's just so good to see you. I very much love and respect you, brother.
And the same to you, man. Even though you eat crayons. Jared, thanks a lot, man. We'll chat again. So so that's it for today. Turn and burn.